And as you guessed, it does not, the research shows they don't understand it very much at all. In fact, they're confusing what the RET is. They hear retirement earnings and they hear tax, not test. And that discourages work, as Rachel Gresser pointed out in her testimony, and you mentioned in your opening statements. What is interesting, and this is also what my colleague mentioned, that the people hear this and then they see this idea that money's being taken out of their Social Security check. So they actually then think it's a tax. They don't understand potentially they might get it back, and that technically it's actuarially neutral. But no one likes to hear, well, it's actuarially neutral. We'll take it out today and give it back to you tomorrow. No one likes that idea. So it discourages work. We're not sure the research shows why it actually, if people are not working because they're confused about it, or if they just don't want to work, they do want to work and then claim Social Security. But the language we're using, we know is confusing, Senator, and that's why we very much want to change the language on the Claiming Act and also get rid of the retirement earnings test.
Yeah. The U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging will now come to order. In December, this committee highlighted the positive impact that having a purpose and engaging with the community has on older Americans. Witnesses shared powerful testimonies and firsthand accounts about how staying engaged, whether through volunteering, mentoring, or taking on new responsibilities, helps seniors live a happier, healthier life with a renewed purpose and goal for their next chapter. Not only is this kind of activity enriching and beneficial to seniors, but also it helps their communities too. In our December hearing, witnesses spoke about the many, many ways older Americans strengthen the U.S. economy, thanks to the expertise and perspective they bring to the job. The truth is that retirement doesn't have to be the end of one's career. For many, it's the start of a new, purpose-driven chapter in their lives. Seniors can and should use this time to chase and reach new goals and dreams. Maybe try the new hobby they hadn't had time for in the past, start a business doing odd jobs around their neighborhood, volunteer at their church, or even substitute teach at their grandkids' school. In all of these things and more, seniors offer valuable insight because they have lived a full life of experiences and knowledge that can be passed on to the next generation. However, in that hearing, witnesses also shared some of the challenges members of our aging community face when their goals and dreams involve continuing to work or even going back to work full or part-time. In today's hearing, we'll look more closely at what these challenges are and how government is making it worse. The fact is, there are laws on the books that penalize older workers unfairly. The retirement earnings test is one of them. This test punishes workers between the ages of 62 and 66 who start to claim their benefits they are absolutely entitled to and have earned. It essentially takes $1 of their benefits away for every $2 they earn once their income hits $24,000 a year. The retirement earnings test was passed during the Great Depression, specifically to push older Americans out of the workforce and free up more jobs for younger Americans. But as we are all aware, it's not the 1930s anymore, and we shouldn't expect our seniors to be punished today by outdated policies passed then. Aging Americans deserve better. That's why I've introduced the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act, along with my friend and fellow committee member, Senator Tupperville. Our bill will get rid of the unfair retirement earnings test so that seniors who want to stay in the workforce can do so without being punished or robbed of their hard-earned benefits. But we need to do more than that. Even if we get the RET repealed, seniors still face mountains of administrative red tape to get information on how their benefits are impacted by when they retire. The same red tape also makes it hard for seniors to decide when they should start withdrawing their benefits. Many Americans don't realize that when they start withdrawing can actually impact how much they'll be entitled to. This not only affects our seniors retiring today, but all Americans who are actively planning for their future. We shouldn't be making it more difficult for our seniors, our future seniors, to find the information they need to make the best choices for themselves and their families. We should be making it easy, straightforward, and transparent so all Americans can make the best decisions as they plan for retirement. That's why I co-sponsored the Claiming Age Clarity Act, which also has the support of two of my colleagues on this committee, Ranking Member Gillibrand and Senator Warnick. This bill would give seniors better and more straightforward information about how their Social Security benefits change based on when they retire and when they start claiming their hard-earned benefits. The fact is, workers age 55 or older have been the fastest growing age group in the labor force more than 2 decades. In 1994, they made up just 10% of the workforce. In 22, 24%. People are living longer, staying healthier, and wanting to keep working and giving back to their communities and pursuing new goals and challenges. If our seniors want to stay at work, we should be empowering them and giving them all the information they need so they know what that means for their future. It's not the government's job to tell Americans when they should stop working. or when they should claim their benefits. And it's definitely not the government's role to punish those who want to continue their careers later in life. Government should be working for our aging population, not against it. We should be giving our seniors transparent information and ample freedom to choose what is best for them. We should not penalize hardworking Americans for continuing to work after they reach retirement age. Because at the end of the day, it's older Americans who bring the experience and expertise necessary to get the job done. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how we can get government out of the way, inject transparency, and make seniors have the information and freedom they need to make their later years their best years. Now I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was very well said. I appreciate your calling this hearing today, and I'd like to extend a special thank you to our witnesses for sharing your stories, expertise, and knowledge with us today. We can't make these decisions without the input from our constituents and smart experts like you, so we're very grateful for the collaboration. As mentioned by the chairman, when we look at the U.S. Census demographic data, approximately 65 million Americans, or nearly 20% of the nation's population, are currently over the age of 65, and that population is continuing to grow. By 2040, we expect 1 in 5 Americans will be 65. The U.S. workforce is rapidly changing. According to GAO, older workers now represent nearly a quarter of our total workforce, a growing share that reflects broader demographic shifts. But for that reason, we must evaluate our programs. We have to evaluate our rules and our laws and make sure that both employees and workers can navigate today's environment. Since the 1930s, Social Security has provided the financial security to retirees and protected individuals against risks like disability and death. Today, 74 million Americans rely on Social Security benefits, and 184 workers pay into the system. One of the biggest retirement decisions Americans make is when to claim their Social Security. That decision gets even more complex for seniors considering collecting Social Security while also working, particularly because of the program's retirement earnings test. Certainly, there are lessons to be learned from the successful bipartisan reform in 2000, while the congressional record also points to budgetary and poverty issues that we also have to evaluate. Rising costs are forcing many older adults across the country to remain employed or to consider returning to work. For many, this is not a life choice, but it's not a lifestyle choice. It's an economic necessity driven by the skyrocketing costs of healthcare, housing, groceries, and utilities. And when these individuals decide to re-enter the workforce, they can face real barriers like age discrimination, the need to develop new skills, and other challenges that make it harder for older adults to live financially secure, independent lives. These individuals, like all Americans, deserve seamless access to the Social Security Administration. But my constituents are telling me otherwise. They report long wait times, both on the phone and for in-person appointments, difficulty finding out whether field offices are even open, and significant delays in obtaining those answers. This is happening at an agency that has cut nearly 7,000 staff since the start of 2025, marking the largest workforce reduction in the Social Security Administration history. So I will continue to fight on behalf of my constituents for an agency that functions well, treats its workers fairly, and provides employees the training they need to properly serve the American people. There are many solutions that Congress can undertake to support our seniors' economic resilience. I'm also committed to strengthening and protecting Social Security while also supporting older adults in the workforce by banning forced arbitration in cases of age discrimination, which can be achieved through a bill I have, the Protecting Older Americans Act. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about our nation's work and retirement landscape. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ranking Member Gillibrand, it's also great to work with you. I'd like to welcome our witnesses to today's hearing. They are experts in workforce and retirement policy and are here to discuss the important role older Americans play in today's workforce. First, I'd like to introduce Rachel Grisler. Rachel is a senior research fellow in the Plymouth Institute for Free Enterprise at Advancing American Freedom, AAF, and a visiting fellow in workforce at the Economic Policy Innovation Center. Prior to joining AAF, she spent 12 years as a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation and previously served for 7 years as senior economist on the staff of the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress. She is recognized as an economic expert in workforce, Social Security, pensions, family policy, fiscal policy. I want to thank you for being here for the third time. Your expertise is clearly very much appreciated here. Please begin your testimony. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Gillibrand, for the opportunity to be here today. In my testimony, I would like to review the role of older Americans in the workforce and then explain a simple and pro-growth proposal to support instead of penalize older working Americans. Older workers are the fastest growing segment of the labor force, accounting for 3/4 of total employment growth since 2000. While part of this rise is due to the sheer number of the aging baby boomers, older Americans' labor force participation rates have increased 6 percentage points, even as younger people's participation rates have declined. Today's seniors are redefining what retirement looks like. Rather than a one-time permanent exit from the workforce, about half of Americans are choosing non-traditional retirement paths, including transitioning to more flexible part-time or independent work, as well as unretiring by coming back into the workforce after an initial exit. This shift reflects new opportunities and changing preferences. Americans are living longer, healthier lives, and many want to remain engaged and productive. And doing so provides physical, mental, and financial benefits. At the same time, flexible and independent work arrangements have made it easier for older Americans to continue working in the ways that work for them. Older workers' positive contributions cannot be understated, especially amidst cultural shifts that cry out for older generations to impart their wisdom, experience, and resilience to younger generations. Yet, certain government policies make it harder for seniors who want to continue working to do so. One policy in particular directly penalizes them. That is Social Security's retirement earnings test, which is a relic of the Great Depression when policymakers wanted to push older Americans out of the workforce to try to free up jobs for younger workers. Today, we want and need older workers. While the retirement earnings test is little known and often misunderstood, it functions like an initial 50% tax. So for individuals who first claim Social Security benefits before the normal retirement age, which is going to be 67 next year, and this is what most people do to claim benefits early, they lose $1 in benefits for every $2 that they earn over the limit of about $24,500 per year. This results in, for example, a marginal tax rate of 74% for somebody who's making $29,000 and a marginal tax rate of 84% for somebody who's making $70,000. Not surprisingly, studies show that this causes people to work less and earn less than they would otherwise choose. And while those lost benefits are gradually added back into recipients' monthly checks after they reach the full retirement age, most people don't know that, and they perceive the test as a pure tax and subsequently reduce their earnings or stop working altogether. Moreover, individuals with lower life expectancies typically don't recoup all or sometimes any of those lost benefits. The earnings test is also confusing for seniors, and it costs the Social Security Administration $70 million per year to administer. And this includes hundreds of thousands of improper payments issued through it. Now, if somebody wants to stop working at age 62, that should be their choice. But unlike their Great Depression era counterparts, today's older workers shouldn't be ushered into an early exit by an outdated Social Security provision. Ending Social Security's retirement earnings test, as Senator Scott's Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026 would do, is a win-win. In addition to erasing confusion and administrative burdens, I estimate that it would add up to 1 million workers to the labor force and increase personal incomes by up to $66 billion per year. That extra work and earnings would generate up to $18 billion in annual tax revenues, including an additional $8 billion per year for Social Security, which would modestly extend the program's solvency. The last time that Congress addressed the retirement earnings test by eliminating it for everybody above the full retirement age, the bill passed with 100% bipartisan support. And now that the retirement age is almost 67, it's affecting millions more seniors. Americans of all ages should have the freedom to work, and Social Security recipients should not have their benefits taken away because they're positively contributing to the workforce. In summary, many older Americans are already leading the way with their continued contributions. Policymakers should clear the path for current and future seniors to remain engaged by removing outdated barriers and supporting flexible work. Ending the retirement earnings test is a practical and pro-growth place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for being back. Okay, next we have Johnny Taylor. He's the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Society for Human Resources Management. His career spans more than 20 years as a lawyer, human resources executive, and CEO in both the not-for-profit and for-profit spaces. Thanks for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Gillibrand. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. Let me begin with a sort of simple reality. America's workforce is changing. We've all talked about it. The fact of the matter is we know it. You've pointed out that in 1994, about 12% of Americans in the workforce were age 65 and older. Today, that's closer to 20%. We also know a shocking stat that I often tell people that the fastest growing segment of the U.S. workforce are people 75 and older. Not just 65, 75 and older, albeit on a smaller base. But the fact of the matter is people are working longer, much longer. And this is not a temporary trend. It's a structural shift, and it requires us to rethink how we approach work and retirement. First, as you've all pointed out, this is good for people. At SHRM, where we represent approximately 340,000 members across the country in every industry, we're seeing a clear shift. People are not just working longer because they have to. There are some, but they're working longer because they want to. Because work provides more than a paycheck. It provides purpose, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, and connection. And research consistently shows that older adults who remain engaged in work, they experience better mental and physical health outcomes, including lower rates of depression and stronger cognitive function. Why? Because work keeps people connected and engaged. So when we talk about extending workforce participation, we're not just talking about economics, we're talking about quality of life and dignity. Second, this is sort of good for employers, really good for employers. Latest JOLTS report says we have 6.9 million open jobs in America. Nearly 7 in 10 organizations report difficulty filling roles, and yet one of the most capable talent pools in America is often overlooked. Experienced workers. At the SHRM Foundation, our philanthropic arm, we call this untapped talent. Skilled individuals, including older workers, who are often overlooked, and we actually need them in the workplace. This is not just a social good, it's a business advantage. Research shows that companies with more workers over age 50 are more productive, believe it or not. In fact, increasing the share of workers age 50 and older by just 10% is associated with a 1.1% gain in productivity, contributing to stronger economic growth and higher GDP per capita. And SHRM data reinforces this. Over 80% of HR professionals say older workers bring exceptional reliability and expertise, and more than 90%, and by the way, you don't get 90% of HR people to agree on anything, say they perform as well or better than other employees. Now, in a labor market defined by uncertainty, experienced workers provide consistency, judgment, and stability. And we are already seeing what this looks like in practice. At Publix, a Florida-based company where I'm a Floridian, a 95-year-old associate works alongside colleagues of all ages. That gentleman is helping model service and mentorship that strengthens the entire team. And at MasterCard in New York, reverse mentoring programs pair younger employees with senior leaders, creating two-way learning that blends experience with new perspectives. My friends, these are not exceptions. They are signals of what is possible when we treat experience as an asset. But our systems simply have not kept up, and you've heard this a lot. Too often, workplace practices and policies still reflect outdated assumptions that retirement is a single moment, that contribution declines with age. Today's workers want flexibility. They want phased retirement and opportunities to continue contributing in ways that fit their lives. And when we don't provide these options, we're not just timing individuals or limiting individuals, we're limiting our economy. And that's why this alignment matters. So let me close with this. The talent is here, the experience is proven, and the opportunity is ours to unlock. If we support flexibility, invest in lifelong learning, and remove barriers to continued work, we strengthen both our workforce and our economy. Because in America, talent does not expire, it evolves. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Good job. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Publix is a great company.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Great state of Florida.
We love Publix in Florida.
Yeah, I think it's it's clearly our biggest employer now.
That's right.
Yeah. So, all right, our next witness, Dr. Jason Fichtner. He is the executive director of the LIMRA Retirement Income Institute. Previously served as the acting deputy commissioner of the Social Security Administration. Nice, easy job. And their chief economist. His area of expertise focused on Social Security, federal tax policy, federal budget policy, retirement security, and policy proposals to increase saving and investment. Thanks for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. Again, my name is Jason Fichtner. I'm also a senior fellow at the National Academy of Social Insurance, as well as a senior policy fellow at the Center for Social Development at the Brown School of Washington University in St. Louis. And as Chairman Scott, you mentioned, the executive director of the LIMRA Retirement Institute. I am also on the board of directors for the FINRA Investor Education Foundation and a member of the Puerto Rico Pension Reserve Trust, where I serve on both the Pension Benefits Council and the Pension Reserve Board. And as mentioned, I previously served in several positions at the Social Security Administration, including the Deputy Commissioner of Social Security and Chief Economist. All opinions I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization with which I am affiliated. I want to also thank Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Gillibrand for your leadership in ensuring that important public policy issues involving aging and Social Security get the attention and the debate they deserve, and that ideas and viewpoints from all sides are aired in a collegial, productive, and respectful manner. It is truly a privilege for me to testify before this committee today. My testimony today focuses primarily on the importance of reducing confusion around the Social Security claiming decision related to the Retirement Earnings Test, or RET, and the nomenclature that Social Security Administration uses to describe the various ages at which a beneficiary can claim retirement benefits. One of the key financial decisions facing older Americans is when to claim Social Security retirement benefits, as Ranking Member Gillibrand mentioned. In fact, when to claim Social Security may be the most important retirement decision someone will make. While these benefits are available as early as age 62, claiming later permanently raises monthly benefits, with the maximum benefit available to those who claim at age 70. Delaying claiming is thus equivalent to purchasing a greater inflation-adjusted annuity that will be paid for as long as the beneficiary lives. Most people, however, do not claim Social Security at their optimal age, usually because they claim too early. Research demonstrates that many people lack the financial education and understanding to make complex financial decisions, including about risks in retirement. The information people receive and the form it takes can also influence how people make financial choices. For example, with respect to the claiming decision, people act differently to the framing of age 62 as the early eligibility age than they would if we framed claiming at age 62 as a penalty that results in lower monthly benefits for the rest of your life. In 2008, when I was at SSA, and based on research, we removed the so-called break-even analysis from use by claims representatives when talking to the public about when to claim Social Security, because we recognized that the framing was potentially biasing people towards early claiming. And we want the public to have necessary information and education presented in a manner so that they can make the informed decisions. We changed this because it was very important. As provided in detail in my written testimony, I hope to leave the committee with the following takeaways. First, the retirement earnings test is overly confusing and should be eliminated, or at least rebranded, to better educate the public about its rules to clear up considerable confusion about the relationships between working and claiming retirement benefits. Second, the official names of claiming ages that SSA uses should be changed to better reflect the implications of claiming decisions. For example, SSA could rename the early eligibility age the minimum monthly benefit age, and age 70 as the maximum monthly benefit age. Third, when thinking about framing, a phrase I would like for retirement security is, quote unquote, income is the outcome. We need to modernize the traditional three-legged stool to bring the concept into the current age by focusing on how we can promote additional income in retirement, which includes reducing barriers for those who want and are able to continue doing so and working in their later years. Along with reducing confusion in the Social Security claiming decision, this includes reducing barriers for seniors to continue working in their later years. Fundamentally, claiming Social Security does not mean one needs to stop working, nor does stopping work mean one must claim Social Security at the same time. Many people will either want or need to continue working and saving into their later years. Public policy should be designed to allow them to do so. Thank you again for providing me with the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks for being here. Let me turn it over to Senator Kim to introduce the next witness.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Scott. I want to move to introduce our next witness, Dan Adcock. Mr. Adcock is the Director of Government Relations and Policy for the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Previously, Mr. Adcock served as Legislative Director at the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association. During his time there in September 2000, he helped to create the federal long-term care insurance program and advocated on behalf of beneficiaries enrolled in the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid programs. Mr. Adcock also served as a professional staff member with the House Committee on Education and Labor, where he helped write the 1992 reauthorization of the Older Americans Act. Mr. Adcock, you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, and dear Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Gillibrand, thank you for inviting the National Committee to testify before you today. Max Richmond is sorry he could not join you, particularly because he was a staff director of this committee and because he worked closely on the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act with Senator John McCain leading up to its enactment in 2000. Workforce participation depends on the older workers' health, but it's also influenced by their financial circumstances, the availability of jobs, and the willingness of employers to invest in older workers. Congress must remove impediments older workers confront when deciding whether to continue work, while ensuring any changes do not inadvertently force seniors into the workforce because they simply cannot afford to retire. One piece of this puzzle is repealing the retirement earnings test. The National Committee supports Chairman Scott's repeal legislation in concept. However, before Congress enacts such a major change to Social Security, we believe this committee should carefully explore three basic questions. Number one, will everyone benefit from repealing the RET? And if some workers end up worse off, are there ways to mitigate the financial impacts on these workers and their families? Number two, will repealing the RET actually increase the participation of older Americans in the workforce, or are there other legislative changes that should be made to advance this goal? Number three, what will the impact of repealing the RET be on the Social Security Administration's ability to implement the change and on the solvency of the Social Security trust funds? I know from attending town halls with seniors that repealing the RET would be extremely popular. After the last repeal of the RET in 2000 for claimants who reached the full retirement age, I know that many seniors who are not covered by the law complained that they had been left out. In part, this is because the RET is extremely complicated and tends to induce fear and uncertainty. Many seniors don't realize that Social Security benefits withheld under the RET are later returned to them through higher monthly payments for the rest of their lives. Those who don't know about this feature of the RET may find it difficult to fully weigh the impact on their own family's finances. For Congress, it is this element of the RET that contributes to the challenge of projecting the positive and negative impacts of the RET repeal legislation. While we hope the repeal of the RET will increase older worker employment, that won't happen if employers continue to discriminate in hiring based on age. That's what this committee found at your September 3rd, 2025 hearing. To address this challenge, you focused on bipartisan legislation, S-2703, the Protecting Older Americans Act of 2025, which the National Committee supports. This bill would eliminate the current practice of employers utilizing forced arbitration to resolve age discrimination complaints, which would shift some of the leverage in these claims back to the workers. The National Committee is also concerned about the Social Security Administration's ability to implement the RET repeal since the agency has undergone a dramatic downsizing as a result of DOGE-inspired staff cuts. In the short term, SSA will be required to modify its computer programs to reflect the elimination of the RET's impact on early retirement reductions. The education piece of an RET repeal is especially important to help beneficiaries make good decisions about when to claim retirement benefits. We urge you to ensure that SSA has enough additional resources to do this work so it is not forced to shift resources from its other operations, which are already severely underfunded. Finally, we know from former Social Security Chief Actuary Stephen Goss that RET repeal will ultimately reduce trust fund costs, but we are concerned how paying more benefits shortly after the RET repeal is enacted would affect Social Security solvency when reserves are expected to be depleted by 2034. The question needs to be answered before repeal receives serious consideration. In conclusion, I want to thank you again for holding this hearing, this important hearing, and for inviting me to testify. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for your testimony. Now we'll get to questions. Rachel, the retirement earnings test was originally designed to help younger Americans get jobs when unemployment ran rampant during the Great Depression. Does that make sense to keep in place now, nearly 100 years later?
No, it doesn't make sense anymore, as we are needing more workers and more producers, and even that original thought was a little bit flawed to begin with, because you actually want more workers to produce more, to generate more demand. So on both ends, that should have not been the policy to begin with. But absolutely today, not only do we want more people working, we need more people working. By 2034, there will be more seniors in the U.S. than there are children for the first time in U.S. history. And so we need those older workers.
All right. Mr. Taylor, you have written extensively on the value that older Americans bring to the workforce. What are you hearing from employers? Are they trying to recruit and retain older workers, or is there still quite a barrier of age discrimination?
So there's no question that ageism is alive and well. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, during the post-COVID period when unemployment was sub 2% in some states, we didn't see as much rampant ageism because we needed the talent. We continue to need the talent. That being said, there are still certain barriers. We've got to work on changing the language, as you've described in many ways, how we speak about older employees. That continues. There's a built-in narrative that it's time for you to move on. There's a perception amongst younger workers that you're keeping me from my next opportunity because you won't move on. So there's an inherent tension that
never happens in politics.
Never happens. and as a result, that really does present some some significant problems in the workplace. Younger employees want their next shot, and the older employee isn't moving on. So what we're trying to do is describe these reverse mentoring programs, opportunities for people to take on part-time roles, which older employees are willing to do, especially if you solve for the RET challenges. And so we think we can solve for this. The other big challenge is flexible work. What we need increasingly, because of worker productivity and lower worker productivity participation rates, we need older workers in the workplace. And so there's not as much of a barrier as there has been when it comes to ageism, but it's alive and well for people who have their own biases.
That makes sense. Yeah, whenever you're going to run for re-election, everybody that wants to run for your office suggests you ought to move on. They have something else for you.
That's right.
So, Mr. Fichtner, there's a problem with how the retirement earnings test is discussed with beneficiaries. It's complex and not very transparent. What does research show about how well older Americans actually understand these rules?
It's a great question, Senator, and as you guessed, it does not, the research shows they don't understand it very much at all. In fact, they're confusing what the RET is. They hear retirement earnings and they hear tax, not test. And that discourages work, as Rachel Grezer pointed out in her testimony, and you mentioned in your opening statements. What is interesting, and this is also what my colleague mentioned, that the people hear this, and then they see this idea that money's being taken out of their Social Security check. So they actually then think it's a tax. They don't understand potentially they might get it back, and that technically it's actuarially neutral. But no one likes to hear, well, it's actuarially neutral, we'll take it out today and give it back to you tomorrow. No one likes that idea. So it discourages work. We're not sure the research shows why it actually, if people are not working because they're confused about it, or if they just don't want to work, they do want to work and then claim Social Security. But the language we're using, we know is confusing, Senator, and that's why we very much want to change the language on the Claiming Act and also get rid of the retirement earnings test.
Yeah, makes sense. Mr. Adcock, how can employers better recognize and leverage the experience and institutional knowledge that older workers bring?
Well, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think that's especially with workers who are professionals and who are white-collar jobs. I think that many of them are in tune to the idea of trying to bring people back and value bringing back older workers and the experience they have, and also being flexible about how they bring them back. So, because some workers may not want to work full time, they may want to have a glide path towards retirement. So maybe for 5 years they want to work part time or as a consultant. And I think if employers do that, I think that's the case. But I think where it becomes very challenging is blue-collar jobs, where people are physically not able to work any longer, or employers don't perceive that they have that ability and are reluctant to keep them on. So I don't know that a lot of that is happening in that particular part of employment, but certainly if workers are physically able to do it and can, they should.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, you lead an organization that represents hundreds of thousands of HR professionals from basically every sector of the economy. Your organization sets the standards for how employers think about talent. Is there more that can be done to improve how we treat workers over 62 and help them be viewed as an asset rather than a problem?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are three things in particular. One, screening practices, such as focusing on graduation dates in people's resumes. You're talking about an obvious way to commit ageism without leaving a trace of it, is you look simply at a resume and you can do the math and conclude the age of a person. So we're advocating for individuals to actually exclude graduation rates from their resumes. That's something employers can do. Secondly, coded language that we use, like digital native or fast-paced environment, words that suggest we're looking for younger people without saying younger people explicitly, which would violate, obviously, ADEA and other laws, local and state laws. And then excluding older workers from upskilling opportunities. There's this really interesting practice that we had historically, which was we'd provide a lot of training and development opportunities for newer workers. And then when you hit about 55, we stopped sending you to training because you were on the other side of your career. And so what we're saying is employers have got to be more mindful about the idea that you might actually provide training opportunities, specifically in this AI world, for older workers. So you're not messaging to them that they've outlived their shelf life.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for coming on out here. Mr. Adcock, I'd like to start with you. I recently became now a caregiver for my own father, and I know 1 in every 4 Americans currently serve as a caregiver, provided uncompensated care to a family member. Many individuals who are caring for their family members are forced to either choose to leave a job or choose to figure out how they can do that and balance it in terms of taking care of their loved one. And depending on when the caregiver leaves a workforce, this can often shortchange Social Security benefits. But there are also increased challenges for older caregivers who are living on Social Security alone upon retiring. In either scenario, it's often the case that benefits are often not enough to get past daily expenses, let alone expenses associated with caregiving. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, as we're considering solutions that could better reflect the work lives of Americans, how could we reimagine Social Security to capture the needs of caregivers in our society?
Thanks, Senator Kim. Great. That's a great question. First, for somebody who is still working, I know that when we talk about a more broad picture of Social Security reform, one of the things that we support, the National Committee, is that there be a Social Security caregiver credit. Because if you are leaving the workforce to care for either a child or an elderly parent, it means for every year that you're out of the workforce, your Social Security record is reducing your Social Security benefit for the future. Legislation has been introduced in the past, which would provide basically a proxy for the time someone left the workforce while caregiving to enable them to have a higher Social Security benefit than they otherwise would. So that's one thing I would do. I think it's once somebody has retired and is on Social Security benefits, I think that's that's a harder nut to crack. I mean, obviously, with regard to Social Security itself, that's why we, obviously as an organization, we're concerned more than just about Social Security, about Medicare and Medicaid and the Older Americans Act. And those programs, various of those programs have various supports for caregivers that we think are really essential and need to be beefed up, especially home and community-based care that the Medicaid program provides, and ensure that that program is there for the long haul. And that the Older Americans Act also is enabled to provide family caregiver support, which it has inadequately been funded in the past, and it needs to be fully funded.
Yeah, as you said, there are different scenarios in which this happened. And for instance, we've been talking to people that are caregivers who claim Social Security benefits early due to their caregiving-related income loss. And I guess the question that we're trying to think through, how do we make sure that they are not structurally disadvantaged in the long term, when it comes to, being under Social Security policy. So what you raised are important questions that I think a number of different scenarios that are out there. And I think it'd be good for our committee as well as broadly here in Congress to be thinking through those different scenarios. Mr. Taylor, I'd like to just turn to you, just kind of building off of some of the questions that the chairman asked about older Americans who want to be able to continue on to work, and just thinking through, what kind of policies should we be considering and pursuing here at the federal level to advance accommodations or flexible solutions that could increase workplace accessibility for older Americans. You talked about some of these different ideas that are out there, including some of the, the language side of things. But I'm just wondering if there are certain tactics or tools that you've seen or opportunities for policies that you think are ones that we should be considering from a legislative standpoint.
Senator, our belief at SHRM is that from a private employer perspective, that there are sufficient legislative policies in place to address age discrimination. Frankly, employers are best positioned as it stands to audit themselves, looking at hiring and talent practices, to remove biased language, for example, from job descriptions and postings, to ensure equal access to training and development opportunities, as I mentioned earlier. Frankly, there's not a sense that any piece of additional legislation or policy is going to solve for that. Employers need the talent. They're convinced of it. We're past the day of saying that, people have outlived their value to us. What we've got to do is just be very intentional about ensuring that our practices don't unintentionally exclude people from the workforce because of their age.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Moody.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much to our witnesses for being here today. We really appreciate it. In Florida, as you know, we have a very large senior population. I think that is growing. Some people refer to it as a silver tsunami, which I love. And I think a large driver of that, I want to say over 50% of returning seniors to work talk about extra money. And I think it's, in Florida, thankfully, we have a thriving state, very easy to start a business, #1 in entrepreneurship, new business formations, we rank high in the nation, a lot of opportunities. I want to better understand what the impediments are. If someone wants to go back and work in their senior years, what those impediments are. I want to understand how we might be able to, as lawmakers, address current law to allow for that. So they don't feel bound in order to receive their Social Security benefits or other benefits. They don't feel bound to not working because if they make more money, they won't be able to receive those earned benefits over the course of their life. I think that is wrong, and we need to fix it because we know that this is going to become more and more of a problem. I think by 2030, all baby boomers will be over the age of 65. My office staff keeps thinking that I am a baby boomer, and I keep assuring them that I am not. But I think by 2034, seniors will outnumber children for the first. It's true, senior senator of mine from Florida. But by 2034, seniors will outnumber children for the first time in U.S. history. And so I want to get it right before then. I want to start working on that now. And I am so grateful. Our chairman, I think this has been the most active aging committee maybe in the history. It makes sense since we have a chairman from Florida. But we know that more and more workers over age 65 are coming into the employment sector, and it's grown by 117% within 20 years. So giving these realities, I want to hear from you. I mean, you're the experts. Again, the chairman's put together a great panel. What are the main impediments? Why, if someone wanted to work, they wanted to earn the extra income, and we know that costs of living are going up, and specifically related to healthcare and drug prices, and we're trying to do everything we can to address that, drug pricing transparency, all of the things that we're doing to address that. But, you know, as they are wanting to make more to cover these increased costs, what is the main impediment that they are facing if they want to go back into the workforce? And I'll start with you, Ms. Gretzler.
Thank you. And I'd like to talk about two. And first is that retirement earnings test. And so somebody who's making a modest amount, $29,000 per year, facing a 74% marginal tax rate in terms of what they get from that additional dollar that they work and earn. When you see that only 26 cents on the dollar coming in a paycheck, that encourages people to just stop working. And so just eliminating that test is just a common sense one, and it would improve the economy. It would improve Social Security. So getting rid of the penalty first.
You think that's the number one thing to do?
I think that combined.
We're triaging
yes.
our approach. Okay.
Yeah, that's the first thing. And second, I would address the people who want to transition out of a formal 9-to-5 job into part-time, more flexible work, enabling them to first be able to have that opportunity. So things like clarity and what is an independent worker versus an employee. And there are two bills on that, the Modern Worker Empowerment Act and 21st Century Worker Act, that would just provide that clarity to make those opportunities available, and then addressing the benefit side of things. So if somebody is, say, 62 and they want to start transitioning out, but they don't want to lose access to their health insurance, and maybe they still want to have a retirement account, having those types of portable benefits be an option through independent work as opposed to the formal employer things you could do. And so something like Unlocking Benefits for Independent Workers Act. So just expanding the flexibility. And neither of these things are like new mandates on employers. They're just removing current barriers that the government's created.
And anybody else want to comment on that?
Less what the government can do, but what private employers can do. We know specifically that there are 4 things that older workers say are barriers to them returning to the workplace. One is flexible working hours. We as employers have the ability to impact that. Secondly, they want us to develop more wellness programs that specifically address age-related health needs. So gym memberships are nice and things like that, but ultimately they want things that are responsive to people that are age appropriate, if you will. Thirdly, phased retirement options, being able to do this. You don't have to go from, 80 to 0 in terms of miles per hour, that you can take this down and maybe do it over a period of time. And then fourthly, part-time scheduling opportunities.
If the chairman will indulge me with 30 seconds, I can bring it back to the Claiming Clarity Act, which I think is very important because culturally, we still have this notion that you turn 65 and you retire. And I think that's a cultural thing. The language we use, the terms we use, people hear the term early eligibility age, and no one wants to be late for their government benefits. We don't talk about the minimum monthly benefit age. And when I was at Social Security talking to beneficiaries, just telling them, oh, you're here, you're 62. Do you realize this is a minimum monthly benefit? They'd say, wait, minimum? What do you mean minimum? I can get more? The framing is very important. If we start disconnecting, stopping work from Social Security claiming, then we can start talking about how people could use different types of income, working or retirement, when to claim Social Security that's best for them without confusing with confusing language. So I think that's something Congress can do and we should all do culturally, is maybe we retire the word retirement.
I'm out of time, but I don't think the chairman would let me end with just you on the end.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks, Senator. Just to say it briefly, I think probably the biggest impediment is age discrimination. I think that there are situations where people really do want to go back to work, but their potential employer doesn't value their work, and so that's a real problem. In terms of, what my colleague just said, I think that's a really huge deal. We're talking today about repealing the earnings test, and for some individuals that might make sense. But I think the bigger problem is just misunderstanding of how all this works and how it's a good thing or a bad thing for individuals, and especially that people need to go into this with their eyes wide open. That they need to understand that they actually do get this money eventually back. It's currently withheld by the retirement earnings test. And if it was repealed, would it make sense for them to do that? But also they need to be cognizant of the fact that if they decide to claim benefits early, that's going to change that's going to lower their benefits for their lifetime, and not only for them, but potentially for any survivors they have in the future. So they really need to really understand that before making those very important decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You think they do?
What's that?
Do you think people know?
I think sometimes they do. I think sometimes they don't. That's why if your legislation became law, I think it's really going to be incumbent on the Social Security Administration to educate potential beneficiaries about what decision is in their best interest.
I'm trying to think. I don't think on what I get a form every so often, right? I don't think it's ever talked about survivor benefits that I remember. I have to look at it. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when he ran for president in 2024, Donald Trump repeatedly promised that he, quote, wouldn't touch Social Security. And as soon as he took office, he immediately directed Elon Musk, who thinks that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, to doge his way through the Social Security Administration. He slashed staff. He created new administrative hurdles that make it harder for Americans to get their checks, money that they earned. That is effectively a benefits cut. Now, Senate Democrats have fought back, and we have forced the Trump administration to reverse course on some of their most harmful policies, but this fight is not over. Social Security Administration is still facing a customer service crisis, and the Trump administration and the Republicans are still looking for ways to cut Social Security. So their current approach is make Americans work until they drop dead. So just listen to what Trump's appointees are saying. When asked about raising the retirement age, Social Security Administrator Frank Bisignano said, quote, everything is being considered and will be considered. Mr. Adcock, you are a Social Security expert. How would raising the retirement age affect Americans' benefits?
Well, simply put, it's a benefit cut. It doesn't matter whether you claim Social Security benefits at 62 or 70 or how long you live, it's a benefit cut in any way you slice it. And so for every year you decide that you're going to raise the retirement age, you're taking about you're losing $24,000 of income for every year. But then in your future benefits, for every year that it's increased, you're losing about 7% of your benefits.
So raising the retirement age on Social Security by 1 year costs $24,000, and over your lifetime is about a 7% benefit cut. Is that?
For each year.
For each year.
Yeah, that's right.
For each year.
So because some of the proposals that are being discussed would raise it from 67 to 69 or 67 to 70.
So if you go to 70, if you do the math, how big is the cut?
Well, the math ends up being, it's a 20% future cut.
A 20% future cut.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Frank Bisignano is not alone in this. After the Republicans blew trillions of dollars on a tax cut for their rich buddies in their big, beautiful bill, Dr. Oz said the way we dig out of a deficit is having, quote, the average American work a year later and not retire. Mr. Adcock, how many Americans without a college degree work in physically demanding jobs?
In that category of people who don't have college educations, about 41% of them.
So what does it mean to work an extra year?
Well, it means an extra year that you don't have benefits, and especially, when we're talking about this particular group of people who need to retire early, generally their longevity isn't as long. I mean, I think I've seen studies where when you take the bottom half of the income scale, they live about 5 years less than the people at the top end of the income
Wow.
scale. And and especially the other part of this is that if you do have a physically demanding job, and you're likely also to be from a community of color, in these situations, it means that you're going to need to claim benefits early. And so today, under current law, if you claim early at 62, you're taking about a 30% cut to your benefits. Had you not waited until your full retirement age, currently at 67. But if you were to raise the retirement age to the full retirement age to 70, we're talking about a 50% cut.
Wow. Wow. And I just want to add in this, there are obviously also people who have college degrees who also have physically demanding jobs.
Sure.
Am I right on that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right. My favorite example are kindergarten teachers. Try it sometime.
Right.
But unsurprisingly, Dr. Oz is not thinking about the millions of Americans who work in manual labor, who have physically demanding jobs, many of whom have ground their bodies for decades at construction sites, hauling boxes in warehouses, scrubbing bathroom floors, and literally may not be capable of adding work. Indeed, as you say, these are often the people who have to retire early because they're just physically spent. And look, I'm all for older Americans working longer if they want to work longer. But let's not confuse wanting to work with being forced to work because the Trump administration is taking a sledgehammer to Social Security. Instead of hanging those workers out to dry, we should be expanding and protecting Social Security, especially when tariffs and war are now driving up prices for our seniors, for everybody in this country. So, Mr. Adcock, how could we pay for bigger Social Security benefits?
Our preferred solution would be making the wealthy pay their fair share.
Yeah, that seems right to me. Look, we've got to make sure that the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share and not force seniors to work until they drop dead. Right now, a billionaire, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, pays as much in Social Security taxes as someone who makes $175,000 a year. I've got a bill to fix that, and it would raise enough money to increase benefits by $200 a month for every senior and help stabilize Social Security to make sure it is around for the long haul. Social Security is not charity, it is a promise. And it is a promise that people have earned. And the Trump administration is trying to strip away that promise, trying to chisel it, trying to shrink it up, and then rebrand it as an opportunity to work. Americans aren't buying it, and we're going to keep fighting back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. I want to address the question of privacy concerns that people whose data is on the Social Security Administration servers are facing. On March 10th, the Washington Post reported that Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General is investigating a whistleblower complaint alleging that a former DOGE employee assigned to SSA improperly stored beneficiary and worker-sensitive personal information on a personal thumb drive and further shared it with his employer, a publicly traded information technology company. This follows allegations in 2025 from SSA's then chief data officer regarding the improper actions and storage of SSA beneficiary information. In November of 2025, and again in February of 2026, joined by Senators Schumer and also Brooks, we requested that the IG initiate an investigation to determine once and for all the scope of the personal information that was compromised. So, Mr. Adcock, can you discuss the potential risk to both Americans, individual Americans, and our national security of having the most sensitive and personal data insecure?
Sure. I mean, it's something we hear from our members quite a bit from, that they're concerned about it, along with other chaos that has happened because of DOGE in the managing the Social Security Administration. Yeah, they understand that so much of their personal information, both healthcare and Social Security, is part of that database. And heretofore, they believed that was a pretty secure site, that they didn't really have to worry about it. But now, basically, because of this information disclosed in court cases that it has been, sold to third parties, I think it's very troubling for a lot of our members. And so they're really concerned about how this is being managed. And it also speaks to just the overall database itself in terms of proposals to try to take it from the current system to a new system in a very short period of time without any extra money, and what that could mean for ensuring that all the information that's there, like work histories that determine benefits, that stays pristine and that still is enabled, that database is intact so that we can ensure that benefits are really what they should be. I mean, that's why, for instance, people have been we've advised our members to go and to start a My Social Security account and to save all their work history. So in case if that information was ever lost by accident of what's going on at the Social Security Administration, they would have that.
Yeah, we hear, I mean, I've been on the Armed Services Committee for almost 20 years, and if you lose your data about what you did in the military, it's very hard to get your benefits sometimes. So I think this data protection is a very big issue that we all have to be concerned about. Mr. Fitchner, would you like to add to anything?
Actually, I would, Senator. This is a very important issue on privacy, and I'm a little bit out of the loop on this. It's been a while since I was digging in this, but when I was at the Social Security Administration, we were so concerned that working with Congress, I think that's when we got rid of the Social Security number off of Medicare cards. We went to a Medicare number. And I think one of the things to start considering as you think about privacy is the Social Security number has become a de facto national ID number. And it's linked to everything you do. It's on your tax return, it's on your employment records, it's everything. Maybe it's time to start thinking about how you can segment those. You can have a separate number for your tax return, separate number for Medicare, for Social Security. So if some hacker gets one number, they don't get your entire life.
That's
and I'm
interesting.
very concerned about this from an administration standpoint because you're putting so much information now into Social Security, which also processes W-2s for the IRS.
Yep.
So they have tax information. If that information gets out, it could be very valuable and it could be very detrimental to people when it comes to fraud.
Thank you. I now want to address some of the issues that we talked about earlier in terms of improving the public's access to Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration lost 7,000 workers, which is a lot because DOGE encouraged and pushed them out and pushed out the more experienced workers, the ones who had more years. I've heard from New Yorkers they've really struggled to be able to talk to somebody at the Social Security Administration and hard to get an appointment. In March of 2026, the approximate wait time in an office for an office appointment was 35 days. And the agency has limited publicizing its casework metrics. So we just don't have a lot of insight into this. So one potential burden reduction on Social Security Administration would be to eliminate the need to administer the retirement earnings test. This is something that the chairman and I are looking into as a reform that I think is interesting and good. For beneficiaries who remain in the workplace, what major challenges do members report when dealing with the Social Security Administration? And are there any unforeseen challenges with this change that we're talking about? Why don't you start, Dan, and then we can go down the line.
Yeah, no, clearly we've been, for the last, for more than a year now that we receive lots of calls from our members that have made similar complaints that they've had to wait a long time to make an appointment with the field office if they can get in touch with the field office. And now that's being compromised in some sense because in order to make an appointment at a field office, you can't do it individually with an individual field office. It's being switched now to a national call center in which you have to make those appointments. I think the same is true as also accessing the 800 number, of waiting a really long time in order to get calls. Obviously, Social Security disability insurance claims, we don't work as much on those as other organizations do, but we've heard that time, the lengthy period of time in which it takes to adjudicate those cases is really increased too. So yeah, all of these things have been a huge problem in terms of people being able to talk to the agency and do transact business with the agency.
Dr. Fitchner?
It's a great question, Senator. And the one thing I would point out is that before I was asked to testify on this hearing about the retirement earnings test, I've been working with some advocates about the possibility of moving the administration of the RAT over to the Internal Revenue Service, because this is an income-based issue we're talking about. And who is better to manage income-based issues when it comes to working is the IRS, not SSA.
Interesting.
And IRS also has funding challenges, as does Social Security Administration. But as Rachel Gressler put in our testimony, the agency spends $70 million administering the RET. If they're not administering the RET, that $70 million they can put someplace else, including customer service. And I think one of the things, and I'll channel my old boss, Commissioner Mike Astrew, who came before committees on the Hill, on the Senate and the House, asking for more money, and said, here's what I need, and here's how we'll demonstrate and prove to you that we're doing what we say we're going to do. Hold the agency accountable. So if the agency needs more money, have the commissioner come in and say, here's what I plan to do with this money, and here's how I will report to you how we're coming along, which could be public hearings. For a while, the agency was putting on YouTube its operational meetings so you could see their metrics. That's no longer there. I would love to see that back. It was very much a transparency issue to see what the agency was doing in their metrics instead of hiding them, make them public.
Why aren't they doing it?
Very good question, Senator. I do not know.
We could maybe do a letter on that, asking them why. Mr. Taylor, anything to add?
Wouldn't add anything.
Ms. Gressler?
Yeah, so from 2019, we know that the RET could affect about 5 million people, and about 500,000 individuals did have their benefits reduced or completely eliminated. So that's 500,000 individuals who many are going to be confused and are going to call the SSA, try to schedule a visit. So by eliminating the test, you could immediately eliminate all of those things. And so it's a very kind of quick simplification. The one thing that you would need to do is those who are already in that 62 to 66 age range who have had some benefits held back, you'd have to figure out how are we going to get those back to them? Is it going to be an immediate, like one-time refund, or are they going to be in the old system and still move forward and wait until their full retirement age? But that's a pretty easy fix to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, we ought to get the information.
Yeah.
I mean, we ought to find out.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
I mean, we were, both of our states have a lot of seniors.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Gressler, can you speak a little bit about the positive potential impact that repealing the RET will have on the trust fund?
Yeah, so it's a modest impact. I've estimated up to about $8 billion additional dollars per year, and this is because individuals are working longer, and as they work longer, they're paying additional payroll taxes. So that's boosts Social Security's revenues, Medicare's, state and local income taxes, federal income taxes. So it's really kind of a spillover, not just to Social Security, but to all the other government revenues as well.
Mr. Taylor, from your perspective, what are the most common misconceptions employers have about older workers, and how do those perceptions differ from the evidence you see?
So number one, it's that they're unwilling to learn new ideas, and particularly in this AI environment. And what we've learned is there's reticence. Obviously, for good reason. They are not, as we use the term, digital natives. So we have got to be more intentional about training and creating training and development opportunities for older workers. It's a two-way. So some of that has some value to it. The reality is I'm one of those, right? I was born a Blockbuster kid, another Florida company, and the world is just different, right? My 15-year-old has to teach me how to do things, but I'm willing to be taught those things, and we have to be intentional about it. The second area that we find is a perception that they won't work as hard, that younger generations have more youth, vitality, and therefore are willing to put in more hours. And actually, the data would suggest the opposite.
Completely wrong.
But that's some of the perception. So much of the work that we're doing is around narrative building and storytelling. We have to convince our colleagues as well as leaders that, in fact, older workers are just as valuable, if not more valuable in some ways than some of the younger workers at this point.
I think my generation, I think probably everybody thinks their generation is the hardest working. I'm sure my parents thought their generation was the hardest working. And it could be true, right? Who knows? Mr. Fichter, can you explain how repealing the RET test would also provide freedom and flexibility for older Americans when making benefit claims?
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Senator. So one of the issues people see is they still have this cultural issue that when they stop working, they have to claim Social Security. If they claim Social Security, they have to stop working. So one, if we disconnect that, that's the first thing. When they see the retirement earnings test, They think, whoa, I'm going to be taxed for my working after 62. Why am I even bothering working then? And most of them then take the benefits, they don't work. And I think this is also very important when thinking about the importance of income and the benefits. Just to give you an idea, Senator, so I've been working on this issue almost 20 years now. So I really want to thank you for your efforts with this, and Ranking Member Gillibrand as well. Because one of the things I did at Social Security is we got rid of that break-even analysis and made it a personal decision where the agency talks to beneficiaries about them, their spouse, survivors, and they have a double-sided one-pager that I put in my written testimony. But to give you an idea how important the claiming decision is for income, if you were scheduled to get just $1,000 at age 67, just $1,000, claiming at age 62 would give you $700. That's a 30% reduction in your monthly benefits for the rest of your life. If you claim at 70, it's 1,240 benefits. That's a 24% increase. Now, for those who can't do math quickly, the difference between that 62 benefit and age 70 is a 77% increase in your monthly benefit that is inflation protected for the rest of your life. And when may you need that money the most? When you are older, might have health concerns and costs. That claiming decision, that transparency will help you make a better informed decision. And then telling people, look, you can work and get Social Security. You can not work and get Social Security. You can do whatever you want. The idea is now thinking about income as the outcome and how to help people make a better informed decision. And again, I applaud you for your efforts in this.
Yeah. Anybody want to add anything?
I'd just like to bring up a point on the solvency of Social Security and the issue of raising the retirement age. The reality today is that Social Security does not have the ability to continue paying benefits when the trust fund runs insolvent sometime between 2032, the most recent projections, and that's an across-the-board 23 to 28% benefit cut. The reality of that is that even if you waited until 70 to start collecting your benefits, you would not get what the current program pays today.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can, because the comment came up, I'm sorry, whether or not to touch Social Security, like hands off Social Security. What I would encourage the Senate is to put their hands on Social Security, because the default is trust fund depletion.
The default's horrible.
The default is horrible. It is roughly a 23% benefit cut across the board. Technically, you could say Social Security is solvent because it is designed not to pay benefits greater than it has in revenues.
Yeah.
But that default, again, is the worst option. And so I think I would love to encourage, and the trustees have been saying this for over 20 years, the sooner Congress acts, the better. So I would encourage.
It's really not fair. I mean, it's not fair to people that, that rely on it. I was governor of Florida, and I think when I went in, the pension plan was like 82 or 83% funded. And people act like that's okay. Okay, wait a minute.
Well again,
how's that okay? The private sector can't do that.
I chair the Puerto Rico Pension Reserve Trust, and out of the bankruptcy of Puerto Rico, their public employee pension plans were underfunded to the tune of $0, and the $40 to $50 billion of liability, which we're turning around. But this is important to do things earlier, not wait until the last minute.
It's hard.
The point that I wanted to make is that, we talk about how these plans impact older workers, but we haven't oftentimes asked older workers how they actually feel about it. And our research at SHRM suggests that there are 4 things. They say, 1, I get to stay mentally active and engaged. 70% of older workers, 67 and older, say, this is good for me. So you may think this is negative, but it's actually good. Secondly, to maintain financial stability. I actually want to do this. Not that I need to, but maintaining financial stability, vacations, trips, taking care of the grandkids, et cetera. Thirdly, to avoid boredom. The reality is people work for purpose in retirement. And then finally, to continue using their current skills and their experiences. So this idea that it's a bad thing and that we're working people to death doesn't exactly sync with what older workers are telling employers.
Yeah, I mean, some of the jobs are too demanding, right? So, but I think, everybody wants to have, I don't know anybody that doesn't want to have purpose. So I don't plan on retiring. So, but we have to figure out how to preserve Medicare and Social Security. So it's I've only been up here 7 years. It's pretty hard to have the conversation right now. So, but if we don't, it's not fair to the people that are relying on it. Just like when I was governor of Florida, I worked hard to get the pension plan fully funded. So it's hard. Anybody else? Okay. I want to thank everybody for being here today and participating. I look forward to continuing to work with members. If any senator has additional questions for the witnesses or statements to be added, the hearing record will be open until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Thanks, each of you.